Our speaker today is Sherry Kitts, and she's going to be talking about the watch that built an empire and the opportunity meeting an entrepreneur. It's essentially a telegraph operator in Redwood Falls, Minnesota, prompted by a COD watch shipment and launching a buy-sell venture along rail lines. You have the story of Richard Sears and the development of the Sears Roebuck Company. So for a little bit about Sherry, she was raised all over the country while her father worked in the oil business. She has a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Texas at Austin and worked for the Tennessee Valley Authority designing instrumentation and control on the 3 nuclear plants. She met her husband, Glenn, in the cab of a steam locomotive, and which led to a connection with railroad pocket watches and thus to the NAWCC, where she is currently the board secretary. Learning is the spice of life for her, and curiosity led to the investigation of how the rail lines and the pocket watch came together in an interesting way in the Richard Warren Sears story. She realizes she knows a little about a lot, but not a lot about anything in particular, and welcomes comments in addition to the presentation.
Thanks. Thank you, Rick. Well, hello, everybody. Okay, we're hold it closer. Make love to it, right? Okay, how many of y'all marked the Sears book at Christmas time? What you wanted for Christmas? Some of y'all are too young, maybe, to remember that. Yeah, so it was a big part of a lot of people's life, the Sears Watch Company. The first Christmas catalog was not the first catalog, but the first Christmas catalog was 1933. And in 1968, he started actually calling it the Wish book, which everybody else was already doing anyway. Okay, so you can go to the next slide there, Bob. I think in the introduction Jeff gave you this information. This is the story of Richard Warren Sears and the watch that built an empire. And you'll see why I just call it the watch in a minute. There's a little bit of discrepancy when you read a few articles about whether it was watch or watches, but okay, so the next slide. What amuses me about this is these people have kept these houses, although he made a rise for that, but this is he was born in Stewartville, Minnesota, December 7th, 1963. This house was their house in Stewartville. And it kind of surprises me that they've maintained that house and that it's still standing there. And so anyway, after Stewartville, when he was 6 years old, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Bob. They moved when he was 6 in 1869. They moved to Spring Valley, Minnesota. And his father was a fairly, made some good money as a blacksmith. And he built this house, as you can see, a nice big brick house in Spring Valley, Minnesota. And how many of y'all have maybe blacksmiths in the family anywhere? Did any of y'all? Good. Okay. Who do you do it or?
I do it with my grandfather, great-grandfather,
All right, and it's a pretty hard job. It's hard. It's hot. My grandfather was also a blacksmith, and my dad helped him some in the shop, and he was a really honest guy who cared about people. And people it was Freeport, Illinois. He worked next to a machine shop, so he was kind of in partnership with the machine shop. My grandmother was the bookkeeper, but he was quite a character, but he was also really honest and cared about people. And people would come from all over to bring him stuff because he was so good. That's what my dad said. And one time somebody brought him something that had to have a special kiln made to get the temperature right. And he really didn't want to do the job, but he did it. And then afterwards, my dad said, you could have charged him 3 times what you charged him to do that job. It was so hard. He says, yeah, but I don't want him to go down the street and say, there's that so-and-so that, you know. So he was really good. He was really good to people. And he did well during the Depression because people would fix things instead of pitching them and getting something new. So, and I had 2 grandfathers that the other grandfather worked at the railroad and he did claims adjusting. So both of them were okay during the Depression because they had jobs that were needed. Okay, so next slide. All right, and I said Richard's father earned some money as a wagon maker and blacksmith, and but then he did pretty well, but then he lost all his money in stock market ventures. So how many of y'all know somebody, when you read about it in the paper, one of these shysters that has done these pyramid schemes? Y'all know, I know a couple of them that have put their money in, all their money into something like that and lost just about all of it. So anyway, but maybe that killed him. I don't know. That was 1878, lost his money. 1879, he died. So Richard was, and this isn't him. I mean, this is just some blacksmith somewhere. That isn't a picture of him. Okay, so next slide then, Bob. So Richard became the primary breadwinner at that time because he was 16. He was the oldest. And let's see, we're missing the map. Where's the map? Was that the last one? It doesn't like the map. I guess. Or maybe I'm missing something. Anyway, I just had a map up there to show you where Mankato, relative to where he was born, relative to where they were close to Rochester, and both of those towns he lived in, but then he went sort of west Minnesota when he was working. Okay, so let's see. So he moved to. Oh, maybe I did miss something. Okay, so the first job that he had when he was, I think we're all right, Bob. I think it's me. Okay, so he found work in Mankato, Minnesota, and he learned telegraphy, and then he went to the main office of in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So, okay, we can go to the next one now. He's good. He transferred to, my mind is remembering these things in a different order. He transferred to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and to the auditing department there. And in 1884, at the age of 20, now you can see he's a driver. He's one of these people that wants to get ahead. So, if you're like me and you're a slow learner, I look back now and I say, all those people that really got ahead in my company were somebody that looked, said, oh, I'm going to apply for that job. I'm going to apply for that one. And just kept moving from where they were. And I was always so just happy with doing my little engineering job and working with other people and technical supervisor. And I never did do that, but that is how people have gotten ahead. Anyway. So in 1884, he requested reassignment to North Redwood office. It had an opening there, I guess. And this is a picture of it right here. And he's 20 years old, and it was a manager position, managing that operation. Of course, remember, he knew telegraphy. He's learned that. And he did chores to earn the board and slept in a loft. And learned the mail order business. A lot of catalogs would come through there. He'd look at them. And so anyway, he started a side business. The railroad actually offered him cheaper prices on the coal and lumber and stuff so that he could compete with other people. So he had a side business in coal and lumber. And he traded with the Indians and for venison and berries, and sold those up and down the line. Now he's an telegraph operator, so we can let people know what he's got And what, so he's used all this stuff to his advantage. Okay, now I think we get to the map now that I'm trying to accuse you of not having on your computer. When all he did was copy my file. Okay, so where, it's kind of hard to see it, but they were right in here and here. And there's Mankato, and he was over here to the where he started at, where he was born was over there. I think I had it marked in yellow. It doesn't matter that much. But anyway, Mankato was where he went to first, and then where he wound up was Redwood Falls right here. This is where you just saw that picture at the train at the station. Yeah, and his Sears Rochester, he was born here, they moved here to Spring Valley. There's where his job in Redwood Falls. And there's some discrepancies as to where people think he worked for, but anyway, it doesn't matter that much. Okay, so next slide. So we're going to start with scams of the time. And what these firms would do is sell that, and it wasn't maybe just watches, other things too. They would send things COD to people just randomly. And then later on, they'd say, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I'll sell it to you for this cheap price. And in order to, and it's a scam to sell their goods. And in 1886, a box of pocket watches was sent from a Chicago wholesaler to an Edward Stegerson there in North Redwood. And he had fallen victim to this business before. So he said he had won. So Sears saw the opportunity with these watches. When they came through. Now, I will say this, and I actually have a quote. This is a box of watches, right? And a lot of times you read about this, they'll say, he started with this box of watches. Now, here's a quote that actually from somebody that talked to him. It said, Sears himself says this came out of Chicagonology. And it's one of those places sites that won't let you copy anything. You have to write it all down yourself. Anyway, Sears himself says that if a watch from a Fredonia, New York, years ago, hadn't sent him a watch, COD, with privilege of return, if he thought he couldn't sell it, he still might be a dealer in coal, wood, and lumber in northern Minnesota. So he used the term a watch. So kind of what I think probably happened was, at the time, these dealers were probably sending COD watches to railroad people and saying, if you can resell it if you want to. And probably that had happened to him too. But the biggest thing that happened was the light bulb came on with this COD box of watches, I think is probably what happened. So anyway, let's see what I was gonna see. Okay, so the next slide. Then why I'm calling this opportunity meets an entrepreneur. Sears got permission to sell the watch, to buy the watches, to dispose of the watches. And he agreed to $12 a watch and sold them for $14. And they could have been sold for about $25, these watches on the retail market. So obviously 14 looks like a good deal to somebody, right? And he's making $2 a watch on them. Okay, so this one that's shown right here, at the time, by the way, he was making $6 a week running. Of course, he had board too there, but he was making $6 a week running that station, making a lot more money on coal and lumber than he was on that. So I don't know how much, but anyway, this is an Elgin grade 82, 18 size, 15 jewel watch. And it was the reason I put this up here. Well, you'll see in a minute, but it's one possibility that might have been in that box of watches. Because I looked up various major operators around that area, around, out of Chicago and stuff at that time. Okay, so the next slide. So he sold all those watches in 2 days. That entire crate of watches, and I'm not sure, we don't know how many were in there. But, so then he thought, so he ordered more watches. And what he did was get other telegraph operators to sell watches. Okay, so the fuller brush man of the day, you know, the Avon salesman. So he was really, he was quite the marvel. Let's put it that way. Now also, he agreed to these people that he would get to sell these watches for him were bonded. So he was pretty sure that he'd get his money. So they were reputable people in the railroad. So he let them have the watches until they could sell them and then give him the money. And then he could fulfill the COD with the other. So he doesn't have any money at all until he makes his money, right? So within 6 months, he made $5,000, which is $158,000 today. When I looked it up, within 6 months. Okay. So the same year, 1886, age 22, he left the railroad and established the R.W. Sears Watch Company in Minneapolis. And he continued to use the express agents on the railroad. That's what he's used to. That's how he's making his money. So he did advertise in some periodicals at the time. And remember the Elgin watch I showed you that might have been a possibility in that crate. The first watch he got made for himself, for his company, R.W. Sears, was that exact watch, the Elgin Grade 82. So this is, I say watch, a run of watches. And what I have down here is the first run was 5,000. I don't know if he had more made or not. But so that's pretty many watches, right? He's doing this is not a very long period of time. And as all you all might know, Elgin is the largest pocket watch maker of all, far and away above any of the other pocket watch makers. You'll find more of those. The first watch made for Sears, and you can see on the front, it says the R.W. Sears, and it's also on the movement, the R.W. Sears Company. And I think it says, no, it just says, this one just says Elgin National Watch Company. Later on, it gets Minneapolis.
On the bottom.
Yeah. Right here.
Yeah.
Says the R.W. Sears. Yeah, on the movement. And also it's on the dial on this particular watch that Elgin made for him. His office space was $10 a month. So he rented this small office space, had a couple of helpers that did bookkeeping for him and correspondence. And so he was spending very little money to maintain this operation at the time. Okay, so we can go to the next screen. Now, here's some more private labels that he had made. This one's called Famous. That one over there, the Lawrence, is one that I learned very few people know about. They don't even list it as watches from Sears. But this was just kind of let's see, I've got 100 of them made. So you don't find those too often. If you do snap one, they don't actually, these are on the market, not too much money if you wanted to try to collect them. They're not like a railroad grade pocket watch, most of them. They don't cost much. Anyway, now after the Elgin watch, grade 82, these all started coming from Illinois, the Illinois Watch Company. So, and of course, he's around near Chicago area, which is where these watchmakers are. And what else do I want to say about that? Not much. Oh, I know what I want to say about this. He didn't put anything on the dial on these. And the speculation is Illinois charged $1 to put the name on the dial. And he didn't want to spend the extra $1 to put the name on the dial. So, okay, next slide. So then, March 1st, 1887, he was starting to make so much money, he knew being in Chicago, actually, he had a little office, he wound up with a little office in Chicago. Everybody referred to order out of Chicago. So he thought, all the rail lines come through Chicago, blah, blah, blah. So he moved the operation on March 1st to Dearborn Street in Chicago in 1887. And this is the cover page from an 1888 Sears catalog. And one thing I wanted to point out, if y'all remember looking at those old Sears catalogs, all that verbiage over there. I think you and I, today, would anybody look at that? But back then, and back in the day, they said the same thing to him. They said, it's not gonna work. You can't advertise with all the little tiny words like that. And he persisted. He said, okay, I think I've got a quote on this one too. Let's see. Let's see. Anyway, he said, oh, I know, I got it right here. Everyone said that people would not read all that small type. And he said, I'll make them read it. He replied, he said, by making the matter as interesting, so interesting that they will want to read every word. But it worked eventually. He had a lot of things. So, okay, next slide. This one is called, now this is an interesting thing. Don't you think this is kind of the railroad magnet? What do you think that really ought to probably say? Magnate, right? Wouldn't you think it should say the railroad magnate instead of magnet? And everybody still speculates, did he spell it wrong when he ordered it? Did Illinois spell it wrong when they did it? And he just kept what happened there. But it's an interesting little argument you'll never figure out, probably. And this one is engraved for let's see, Minneapolis, I think, on this one. It's one of this one that he had made was when he was still in Minneapolis. Okay, next slide. And I just wanted to show you some of these. Okay, he doesn't go, this private label stuff doesn't last too long, 8 years or 10. This is a Defiance, and also Illinois again, and then that one's called the time card over there. Again, you don't have anything on the dial. You have to look at the movement to see what's going on. And this is one that I have. In fact, I've got 2 watches, and this is one that I brought in back there, so people can look at it if they want to afterwards. Glenn's gonna open up the ones that need to be opened up so we can tell what's going on. Let me see. Nothing else there I want to tell you about. So next slide. Okay, so now, yeah, let's get into some of those watches. And he was always good about saying you can send back whatever doesn't, that some of them aren't going to work. Somebody's going to drop one, break a balance staff. Something's going to happen. They're going to want to send it back to him, right? So he puts an ad in the Chicago Daily News for a watchmaker. And you have to have your tools and blah, 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 state your age, experience, and all that mess. So the answer, it was answered almost right away by this guy here, Roebuck. So his love was watchmaking. He was a total opposite from Sears. He didn't like this high pressure, this high go. But he was a tinkerer, and he had a deal with a guy that had the delicatessen. He had room and board at the delicatessen, and the guy paid him $3.50 a month, and he did any repairs that guy needed, and he repaired things like sewing machines and things like that. But he loved watches. So he answered the ad, and that started that partnership. And the odd thing was their 1 month difference. He was born in January of the year after Sears was born. So they're both very, very young. So 23 years old. So anyway, so he, of course, Sears hired him. And anyway, okay, next slide. Now, What? This is not even here. This is a picture from something that happened in Europe. But what put it up there was, what happened? Well, actually, I did a little more reading and I found out. 2 years later, in 1889, Sears sold RW Sears Watch Company. There's a little discrepancy when you read. Somebody says, some say $72,000, some say $100,000. He sold it. It's around $3 million today. He sold it because as you know, people learn lessons when they're in business. And he had ordered, what I read was he ordered something like 60,000 silver tone watches. Well, what's he going to do with that inventory? And he didn't have the cash to back it up. So he sold the company and decided, now maybe this was out of frustration. He says, I'm just going to get out of that entirely. I'm going to go be a bank. I'm going to go to Iowa and I'm going to get in the banking business. And I just forget I made that big mistake. So, but this is represented to me. How did that work for somebody like Sears? That's that much of a driver, that's got that many ideas that, you know, it didn't work. so it's just, okay. So back to the next slide then, Bob. So within a year, in 1890, he goes back to Minneapolis and he founds the Warren Company, he names it something different. And with his old partner, A.C. Roebuck, he got A.C. Roebuck back again. So they're working together again. And then in 1891, I don't know if this is, anyway, in 1891, Sears sold the Warren Company to Roebuck, who incorporated the company as A.C. Roebuck Incorporated. So we're not very long from when all this started. Like, okay, so the next slide, this is another watch that you'll see back there. This is a watch that I sold by Don Bear can sell you his underwear if you have twin pairs, I'm telling you. But he sold us this. Actually, he sold it to Glenn. I said it's mine. I stole it from Glenn. But this was the one little bit of period of time when it was the Roebuck Company. A.C. Roebuck bought it, and so A.C. Roebuck has his private label watch here, and at 1892. Okay, this one was really hard for me because I'm looking at the thing and I'm going, who made it? I'm trying to figure out what to call it. And I looked at all the names, all the people that had made watches for Sears or Roebuck, and the last one I got, I'm looking at the movements, trying to match the movement because there's nothing really on it to tell you. But anyway, I found out it was the Trenton Watch Company, but it was the last one I looked at to try to figure out what happened. Okay, so next slide. Now, Sears persuaded Roebuck to give him he sells it to him, and then he persuades him to give 2/3 shares back, and there's some debate as to whether Sears ever paid Roebuck anything. But so it's got 2/3 of the company now. When he sold his watch company in 1889, he promised not to compete in the Chicago. He was making a lot of money. He promised not to compete in the Chicago market for 3 years. But as soon as he could, he moves back to Chicago with him. So this is 1893. What was going on in 1893? The Chicago World's Fair, where a lot of innovative things were shown, and it was quite the fair thing. Was that the 999 made the fast run, Glenn? To the 1893 fair, the locomotive, the 999, and they said we were going 120 miles an hour. And that's why Ball named that one watch the 999. So of course Ball didn't make watches, and okay, next slide. Then well, yeah, I'm up here messing a lot of things. I think. Okay, so he expanded beyond the watch industry. As you all know, the catalog started having a whole bunch of stuff in it. So a lot of this is not, I did a lot of watches, and there's a couple more, I think, but I do want to talk a little bit more about Sears and his abilities. By 1893, the Sears mail order catalog was 196 pages. And there was a variety of things advertised. And although he also advertised in magazines and periodicals and so forth. The main selling was through his catalogs, through mail order catalogs. And that's all he did, mail order, right now. And that's an 1897 cover. At the turn of the 20th century, Sears took advantage of the new home building stuff, materials. Have you all seen some of the Sears houses? You can recognize them. And they were good quality houses. But I never did know how many, but it said between 1908 and 1940, they sold 70,000 to 75,000 of those houses. And they took about 2 train carloads of materials. And the instructions were exquisite. And somebody told me, they said, you know what? There was not but maybe 2 nails left when they got done. You know what I'm talking about. They had those materials down perfectly, the instructions down perfectly. So that's amazing. Let's see. In I want to talk about there right now. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is an early Sears Roebuck and Company special, 1896, and this is a private label, but it is on the dial this time, and it's still an Illinois-made one. But maybe they quit charging him $1 for putting the thing on the dial. I don't know. So in 1896, this Illinois and it's called a special. It was called special. That was the name. And it's a special right here. Special, 15 jewels. Yeah. Now, okay, and the next slide, he made less expensive watches too, so we could sell them more people that couldn't afford a 15 jewel watch. The Edgemere was an inexpensive watch. He didn't even put his name on the front. He put Edgemere on the dial. So, and on the movement it says Edgemere, Chicago, Illinois. This is but this one appears to be an 18 size 17 jewel from the NAWCC forums. I learned that lots. You can learn a lot on the forums if y'all ever go to them. And it was derived from various. Most of them were made by Seth Thomas. It says so. I thought Seth Thomas always made all good stuff, but apparently they made some that was of a lesser quality too. Anyway, okay, we'll go to the next slide, ma'am. And this is you got to bear with a couple more watches here. Some of you clock people. And I do apologize to the people that are going to have to listen to this again. Saturday, Knoxville group. That'll be Glenn and Bob Geyer probably, and Jim Colson. All right. In addition to the Plymouth, okay, this is a Rockford-made Plymouth Watch Company set of watches. And this one was called the King Edward, and that one was called Prince of Wales. And it's right here on the Prince of Wales and King Edward. Now that one, you can see I've got what they're 18s, and this was 18 size, this is 16 size, and the King Edward was likely a railroad grade watch because it does say adjusted, which was all that was required at the time. So, and you can read Kent Singer and Edward Roll's article in Railroaders Corner, and they'll tell you that the King Edward was probably would have been a railroad grade watch at the time. And they're 21 jewel watches, both of them, but the other one doesn't. The Prince of Wales doesn't say adjusted on it or anything like that. So, yeah. Oh, does it say it? Oh, okay. Good. I'm glad you guys eagle-eyed people. Okay. Yeah, if y'all have any comments, just jump right in there because like it says, I know a lot about a little about anything in particular. So, okay, next slide. This is one that fools people. They're looking for a Plymouth Watch Company. There isn't a Plymouth Watch Company. That was something that Sears used. He thought it was a great sounding name, and I think that Illinois also sold some of these under that name, Plymouth, besides the ones that Sears sold. But people write into well, I found places in the bulletin, people wrote in, what's this? What company was this? Where was it? It was just a name. So, that they assigned it. This is 18 size 17 jewel watch right here, and just says Illinois on the front, Plymouth Watch Company on the back. It would be kind of confusing. All right, the one, this is the last Sears watch that was probably made by him for him, and it was the best watch that he made or had made. He never made watches. He's just like a ball. He didn't make watches of his own. This is called the Interstate Chronometer by Illinois, and it was the last of the specialty label watches. It was a 23 jewel Illinois bun special. So definitely a rare upgrade watch. Definitely a great watch. So, and this is 1911. Let's see. Oh, I did want to mention in 1976, I don't have a picture of it here. In 1976, Sears sold a 1876 Centennial watch, and it in their catalog, and it was it did say that it had Sears on the dial, and it had fancy stuff on the case, you know, that would represent the centennial period. And all right, so next one. This one I find interesting. He also sold fake watches. These watches were made to look like high jeweled watches, and they were not. But he did say that. He was an honest person. That he would say, this, you can look like you have this great watch, and it's just a 7 jewel watch, and you know. So I don't know whether they just put fake stuff in there or what, but anyway, it even, I think it even didn't say 23 jewel somewhere. Just that stuff. And the Trainman's special and the Engineer special were 7 jewel watches advertised as a cheap trading watch, made to look like the most expensive 23 jewel. Reminds me of some of the stuff you get from China that is actually, you know, they're saying it's this. I think I've got some Sharpies like that. They go at, I swear, they last. Anyway, so exit Roebuck and enter Rosenwald. Sears' adventurous risk-taking was a little bit too much for, go on the next slide, Bob, I'm sorry. Adventurous risk-taking was way too much for the low living Roebuck. He didn't like all that pressure. So he sold his 1/3 interest to Sears. Now watch this, for $25,000 in 1895. How much did Sears get for that company? Yeah, back when he sold it for $100,000, which is $3 million. So that was like a pretty good bargain, doesn't it? That he sold it for $25,000 by then, as you know, it was growing. So Sears sold an interest in the company to Julius Rosenwald in 1895. And Sears was a brilliant marketer, wrote all the catalog material. Well, he had writers, but he was real particular. Somebody would bring him in the catalog and he'd look and say, this watch needs to be turned this way a little bit, or this, you know. He was particular about how that marketing looked. But he wasn't very good at leadership or organization. He was real good at marketing. So Rosenwald brought a lot of that organization to the company and actually made it prosper from there on. One example was he frequently offered merchandise in the catalog that he didn't really have in hand yet. And then people would order it, and then he was scrambling to try to get stuff made. So this is where Rosenwald brought a lot of order to the thing. And it's one quote I found out really got a kick out of. This lady said, would you please quit sending me sewing machines every time? So anyway, next slide. So then with Rosenwald, they worked on doing this this big complex that they built in Chicago, which y'all have probably seen before. I think the thing that still stands is the tower. I don't think that most of the rest of it, like church stuff, but maybe in apartments and stuff, but the tower, they kept the tower. So anyway, the thing was huge. It's 40 acres and like a huge operation. 1906 to 1907 was built this. I read how many boxcars came in a day of materials building that place. I don't remember how many it was, but enormous. Okay, so next slide. So Sears, so the vision for this expansion led Sears and Rosenwald to take the company public in 1906 in order to do this big complex and all that. So this was the first major retail initial public offering in the history of the United States. I wish I'd have bought some back then. Anyway, Sears traded under the symbol S, just S. And they were on the Dow Jones from 1924 to 1999. And at the right is that just financial district in 1904. How many companies are in the Dow Jones? About 20. I think it's 20, isn't it 20? Yeah. Anybody that knows about the song? Yeah, about 20 companies is all that's in the Dow Jones. So when you see the Dow Jones going up and down a lot, it might just be one of those companies that, you know, it makes a big impact on it. Whereas the S&P 500, tons of companies in there. Okay, next slide. So Rosenwald succeeded Sears as president in 1909. The reason, what happened was his marketing schemes got him into a little bit of financial stress around 1906 and or 1908. And so Rosenwald, by now it's a public company, right? So the board there says, look, you're out. We don't want you running these things that are causing us to have a little bit of difficulty. Well, it was also a stressed financial time in the United States. And he was offering people special certificates to get premiums, and they could, for whatever merchandise, with some kind of certificate they had, and these kind of things. Well, so they put Rosenwald in charge instead of Sears. And Sears took a little bit of seat on the board for a while, and then he left in 1910. So Rosenwald took over in 1909. Sears left in 1910 and didn't participate much anymore in the company. He died in 1914 in Waukesha, Wisconsin, of Bright's disease. Does anybody know what Bright's disease is? Mm-hmm. I didn't either. You know how back in the old days they would call things, and we know a lot more about it today. Bright's disease was a kind of a renal disease, but we're not sure exactly what. But they called several renal type diseases Bright's disease. Okay. Now, when he was 50 years old, and his estate was valued at $25 million. So, but interestingly about Sears, he was apparently really a private guy. He was, he preferred his old friends in blue jeans to the high rollers in Chicago. So he partied with them a lot more than he would with. They never answered phone calls, didn't belong to church, didn't belong to any social clubs, did not, when people would, you know, whenever you got money, people call and ask you for money or something. They said they never returned phone calls or anything like that. Now, we're going to see a contrast to that. Rosenwald, you know, is in charge of the company now. Next slide. Rosenwald, the philanthropist. Okay. This is Rosenwald with Booker T. Washington, and they established 5,300 schools for Black children in the South. Because the Black children weren't getting the education at the time that the white children were getting. So, and that's one of the schools right there, picture one of the schools. Okay, and so next slide, then another person, I don't want to dwell too much on these people. This is Robert Wood, and he was credited with starting the brick and mortar. They were starting to compete. People had automobiles. They could go to a store. They didn't have to have mail order anymore. So Robert Wood was the next leader of Sears and hired in 1924 and was credited with these brick and mortar stores. The first one was 1925, and it was in the Sears building right there in the big complex. And of course, they started building out a lot more than that. Let me see if there's something else I want to say about. The stores had an open floor plan, which was kind of a new thing at the time. And another thing that Sears did was he didn't have clerks having in the old days, clerks had to get I would like that bag of flour. The clerk had to get it for you. His stores were you could shop and get what you wanted and bring it to the counter, and you didn't have to have a clerk helping you. So these were kind of innovations at the time. Okay, of course, Sears is out of the picture. He passed away at 50 years old. But okay, now the next slide. Sears, as you know, probably became the largest retailer in the world by 1960s. And it was the first to achieve 1 billion in monthly sales. If the annualized, they announced the building plans for this headquarters in Chicago in 1969. Is opened in 1973. It's 110 stories, 1, 4, 5 feet tall, and it is 1,454 feet tall. It was the tallest building in the world for 25 years. So, and I don't know, have y'all ever seen the Sears? You can go up there in the elevators and look up from the top, and it's pretty good view.
At the observation deck, I've been there, the observation deck at the very top, they have a glass panel, it's like about 10 by 10.
Yeah.
You can step out in the glass, it looks straight down.
Yeah. So, so we went up there one time, yeah, and you can almost feel it swaying up there. You know, when you get those tall buildings in the wind, that's okay. And several iconic brands, you guys could probably name them. Kenmore, Craftsman, Allstate Insurance, the Discover Call. That was all Sears Roebuck stuff. And you know, it really makes me sad about what happened to Sears. And I keep thinking, why didn't they pull some of their, typically Craftsman was a big draw. And the fact that you could bring back a tool if it broke. And have you all ever used the exploded diagrams that they had for anything they sold? Just amazing. I mean, you could like, somebody's telling me, I could go to the local, so I talked to my friend Val, she says, you know, I could go to the local store and they pretty much almost had every piece, anything I might need, the things that commonly broke or that you needed, belts and all this mess. I've used them, and what was on there? But then my friend Frank Wagner sits there. He said, it's Harvard, it's Yale, it's the business school. They're teaching them now how they can use the company rather than making the company good for the people. Good, you know. Do what? Yeah, exactly. I mean, I feel like that's kind of what happened there. And sometimes it's timing, but sometimes it's the people. Okay, so next slide. I just want to conclude with some of the Sears marketing techniques that made him so successful. So the next slide, next slide, yeah. He marketed he said, no middleman. You know, before you'd have these little stores, especially out in the country. And so he would market to the middleman and offered a wider selection at a lower cost, because you didn't have somebody transporting it, somebody, you know, it was just all except for putting it on the train or whatever they did. And then they had initiation of rural free delivery in 1896. So you can imagine what a boom that was to any mail order business, right? And you could sell to the most isolated customers. And another thing I was reading about, it allowed the blacks in the Jim Crow era to have the same shopping experience as a white person. Because a lot of times they couldn't even go into the stores. And so that was good. Now, next slide. Now, because of this, marketing this, it raised the ire of some local business people, and they would give the children, free movie tickets and stuff like that to bring in the Sears catalog, and then they'd have a burning party. Now, I think this picture looks like the Muslims burning Bibles. I don't know, but it just was kind of caught my eye as a good burning picture. And anyway, so they didn't care for him marketing that way. Well, it's just like it's progress. You can't stop progress, right? It's another example. Hey, you can't stop progress. Okay, next slide. Okay, he had a personal touch. He would have people writing actual letters to customers. And this 1908 Sears catalog, don't be afraid, you will make a mistake. Tell us what you want in your own way, written in any language. We have translators to read all languages. So there was one thing. Okay, next slide. The customer service, no money down, practically like COD operation, liberal return policy, discounted prices, and serviceability of goods. He insisted on the goods being good and represented properly. Just like he said, this watch, this is a fake watch, but you can look really good with it. But so yeah, send no money. Yeah, there you go. Okay, and the next slide. Another thing he called the Iowization project. And the best customers distributing 24 catalogs were awarded premium based on any orders they received from those catalogs. So they must have had specific numbers on them or something. And so they, all these things that people even use these kind of things now, but he was an innovator. They were innovators on these things. A club plan. Now, I don't completely understand exactly how this worked, but 38 men involved in a 1 week pool. They just bring in $1 a week. And in the end, one of them, at the end, everybody has a watch. Everybody's helping. It's an insurance program almost. Everybody helps each other out getting a watch by paying $1 a week. And apparently it was a big success. Okay. Other Sears marketing of interest on the next slide is this, my last slide. Okay, so Sears designed his catalog. Here's another thing he did. He made his catalog smaller than the Montgomery Ward catalog. So less expensive but necessary items, and that's especially helped him. Like when they had downtimes, he would be selling underwear and stuff. Not anything fancy. He says people don't buy watches when it's hard times, you know. So and the radio station WLS, did you know it was named for Sears? It's a Sears world's largest store. WLS in Chicago radio station. So anyway, that's what any questions? Yes.
What's this business about Iowa? Where was he in Iowa? What is Iowization?
I don't know. I think it was just a term he found attractive. And since he had lived in Iowa, maybe when he thought he would be a banker in Iowa. I don't know why that's a good question though. I'll see if I can find any more about that.
One more comment. WLS, I grew up in Burlington, Iowa, and I used to listen to WLS in Chicago.
Yeah, it was a powerful station and you could hear it really good. And I used to listen to it in Wyoming. Casper, Wyoming, I could hear WLS.
89.
Yeah.
Offered a number of stations. Open sector, basically 50,000 watts broadcast power, which is far above any local station. And WSB was one of those. And so at nighttime, light conditions, you could hear them 1,500 miles a day. Exactly. And WLS did like a feed to hear all through the eastern.
WSM in Nashville was also one of those Clear Channel 100,000 watts, and that stands for We Shield Millions because it was the National Life and Accident Company, and it's also home of the Grand Ole Opry.
So others picked named, the call letters equal the companies, the first letters of the companies. Wow. Excellent. Okay, we kind of come full circle from mail order then the brick and mortar, and now we're back to mail order in a sense, with the Amazon type companies. And you keep thinking some of these mail order places, if they could have just bridged the gap to get to this time, they would be competing well with Amazon and so forth, you know. But anyway, who was the first? Sears wasn't actually the first major mail order. You know who the first was? Just about 4 years before Sears started. Is Montgomery Ward. You know? Yeah, Montgomery Ward. Yeah, it was. Richard Warren Sears was the real, you know, that started the watch company. Then he had to hire Alvah Roebuck to repair the watches that came back.
Okay.
Yeah. So they were a partnership and eventually became the Sears and Roebuck company.